Today I'm kicking off spooky season with a list of my 31 most rewatchable horror movie staples on physical media. So let's rock this. Hi everyone, how you doing? Welcome back. I'm Fuzz, and today I'm talking about my 31 most rewatchable horror movies on 4K and or Blu-ray. So we got one horror gem for every day of the month in October. Now, when I say rewatchable staples, what I really mean is these are the films that I find to be among my favorite horror movies to revisit. Right? These are the horror films that I do tend to revisit with some frequency, either every year or every couple years or maybe every few years. But I do consistently return to these movies just because I enjoy them so much. I've mentioned this in the past, but for those of you who may not be aware, I still consider myself relatively new to the horror genre, right? And at least in terms of like going all in on the genre and watching copious amounts of horror titles on a fairly consistent basis. Yeah, I didn't really start doing that until about 4 years ago. Just as I was getting back into collecting movies on physical media after many years away from it. Most of my adult life, I was kind of a fair weather horror fan. You know, I wasn't the biggest horror fan for most of my adult life, but I would get on these little horror kicks from time to time where I'd get in the mood to watch some horror movies for a week or two, or a few weeks maybe, right? And then I wouldn't watch any horror movies after that for, I don't know, a few years, right? So I was very much a fair weather horror fan. There were certain movies that I've always liked, but for the most part, I didn't really pay very close attention to the horror genre, right? I was more of an action guy. And then that all kind of started to change for me about 4 years ago. My taste in movies began to evolve as my perspective on movies in general, on the whole filmmaking groove in general, that began to change a few years back. I started taking an increased interest in some of the technical aspects of filmmaking, right? The camera angles, the practical effects, the shot composition, the lighting, the atmosphere, all of those things I started paying a lot more attention to as I got into horror. And because of that increased interest in the filmmaking process, I think it opened my mind more to checking out some films that I had never really gotten into before. So over the last few years, I've kind of started a bit of a new tradition here in my life, and that is every October, I do what I call a 31 Days of Horror Challenge, where the goal is to watch at least 31 horror movies in 31 days. But really, it's about watching as many horror films as you can possibly cram into the month of October. So the operative words here are at least, right? I always try to hit at least my target of 31 films in the month of October, but really the goal is to try and see how much further beyond that goal of 31, how many movies beyond that am I able to squeeze into the month. So every October, I've been embarking on a horror marathon where I don't watch anything but horror for the entire month. And if any of you happen to be relatively new to the horror genre, doing a challenge like this is a great way to get yourself up to speed with the genre within a very short period of time. It's a great way to increase your horror movie knowledge and increase your horror vocabulary in general. And so that's why I've been doing it over the last few years. And I've just had a total blast with this challenge each time I've done it. The horror genre really is a target-rich environment for discovering new films. There's always something new to discover that I haven't seen in this genre, just because there's so much out there, and it really is a rather vast genre. And that's what I love about horror in general. The fact that there are so many different little subgenres that fall under the horror banner that I really feel like there's a little something for everyone in this genre. And you don't necessarily have to be a fan of every single horror subgenre in order to be a big fan of the horror genre in general. I know there are certain subgenres that I'm not personally a big fan of. For example, the found footage subgenre, like Blair Witch Project. That film, I'm sorry, Blair Witch, I thought that film was a pile of crap. An absolute pile of crap. The only thing Blair Witch ever had going for it was the fact that at first people thought it was a real story. They thought the events that happened in the film were real. And that's why it became a thing. That's why it blew up and became so popular, is because everybody thought it was real. But once people learned that Blair Witch wasn't real, that the events in that film were not real, the film lost everything it had going for it. But that's just one example. I mean, I haven't really been a big fan of found footage overall. I've never really seen a found footage film that did much for me. I've seen a few of them, but I've just never been a big fan of that particular subgenre. I'm also not a big fan of the torture subgenre, that's sometimes referred to as torture porn, right? Which I know some people who are into those types of movies, they don't really like it when you call it torture porn. And that's fine. I get it. I'll just say the torture subgenre, for lack of a better term. I'm talking about movies like Hostel, the Hostel movies, Saw movies, and there are a bunch of others. The torture subgenre overall, I feel like it became more prevalent back in the 2000s. And I've just never really been a big fan of that. Yeah, I don't like anything that involves torture. That's the kind of thing where I will turn that shit off fast. You know, if there's a really bad torture scene, I'll fast forward through that shit. Like, I don't need to see that. You know, I'm not into gore for the sake of gore, right? Or gore for the sake of shock value. Now, don't get me wrong. I like gore. There's lots of stuff I like that is very gory, but it has to be done a certain way, right? It has to really serve the film. And I just need more than just a bunch of gore. You know, I'm not the kind of guy that's out there looking for the most insane, most extreme, hardcore thing imaginable. You know, that's not me. That I need a little bit more to my horror movies than just, you know, extreme gore, right? I need good atmosphere. I need a good story, and some other factors as well, right? I look for other things in horror movies. The gore is not what draws me to horror. So when you get into some of these subgenres that are really extreme on the gore, that doesn't really do much for me overall, and I tend to avoid those types of films. That's why I've never watched the Terrifier films, because they didn't sound like something that would be up my alley for that reason. So there are subgenres that I don't like. I mean, I like a lot of horror subgenres, but I have a few that I just don't really get into. I think it's mainly those two, found footage and the torture subgenre. But aside from that, I like all kinds of other stuff. The zombie subgenre, vampires, you know, possessions, you name it. There's a lot of stuff I love in the horror genre overall. But I have my limits as to what I can handle and to what I'm cool with. And there are certain films that I just won't watch, or I'll fast forward through certain scenes because, you know, it's just not my kind of thing. If I have to look away because it's that hardcore and it's that bad, then, you know, that's really not for me. I'm just not interested. So getting back to my 31 Days of Horror challenge, last year when I did this challenge, I think I watched 60 movies in 31 days. And at the time, I had beat my record from the previous year doing the challenge, which I think was about 50 movies that year. Now, this year, of course, I'm doing the challenge again, but I don't think I'm going to be anywhere near as ambitious as I was the last couple years when I did this. I just don't think I'm going to have as much time this month, and so I'm not even going to try to beat my record from last year, the last couple years. I think I'm just going to try and have fun with it and watch what I can and just shoot for getting at least my 31 films in 31 days. But yeah, I don't know that I'll be watching 60 films in 31 days this year. That's probably going to be a bit much and more than what I'm able to do this time around. And of course, if this horror marathon sounds like something you'd like to do as well, you guys are more than welcome to play along at home if you like. I'll be doing periodic updates throughout the month to kind of let you guys know which horror titles I've been watching and how many I've watched, you know, up to the point of that video. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. And if any of you out there are also doing your own horror-thon, you can feel free to comment on my update videos and let me know which horror films you've been watching as well and how you're doing on the challenge. And whenever I do this challenge, I like to watch a mix of both new to me horror movies that I've never seen before, whether they're newer or older films that I've just never seen. And then also I always like to watch at least some of my favorites, like many of the rewatchable classics that are on this list today. All right, so let's get into this list. Keep in mind, these are in no particular order. This is not a ranking here today. This is just a random smattering of some of my personal staples that I consider to be among the most rewatchable horror movies that I own. And also, because I have so many titles here today, I am going to try to move through these a little bit quicker than I usually do in my videos. I mean, we'll see how that goes. You know, if I find something to ramble about and just get going, you never know what's going to happen, right? But I am going to try to kind of breeze through these a little quicker than I usually do on this channel today, just because there's so many titles to touch on today. All right, so first up on 4K from 1979, we've got the Amityville Horror. This is a Vinegar Syndrome 4K release. And, you know, this one, I didn't used to think this one was as rewatchable as I do now. And I think part of the reason I find it more rewatchable now is because of this awesome Vinegar Syndrome restoration. I've mentioned this before on the channel, and you know, it's come up a few times, as is going to be the case with a lot of the movies on this list. We're talking about my favorites here, so chances are I've talked about them before on the channel, or at least touched on them. But this is just an incredible 4K restoration that I highly recommend. If you're a fan of this film, you got to get your hands on Vinegar Syndrome's 4K restoration. It truly is incredible. I saw colors in this film on this 4K that I didn't even know existed. You know, I used to think this film was kind of a dingy looking film. I never really thought much about it in terms of like visual appeal, right? But this 4K is visually very stunning, and the level of detail is awesome. So yeah, it's a great 4K. So if you haven't seen Amityville Horror on 4K from Vinegar Syndrome, I would highly recommend it. And it's one I like to return to just because I have so much fun watching the awesome restoration. So I don't know if it would be considered as rewatchable if it weren't for the great job that Vinegar Syndrome did here, at least for me personally. But one of the reasons I like to return to it quite a bit is because of their awesome restorations. So yeah, Amityville Horror for my first choice. Next up, we've got a John Carpenter film, a Scream Factory 4K release, and I've got this awesome little steelbook to go with it. I'm talking about The Fog, one of my favorite John Carpenter films. I think this is probably my second favorite John Carpenter film, right up there with The Thing. You know, it's pretty high up there on the list. I just love the atmosphere in this film, and that's one of the great things about it. It's not a particularly gory film, but it's very spooky, and it's got some awesome atmosphere. And I mean, the atmosphere is what sells this film. And of course, you can't go wrong with the cast here. You know, you got Tom Atkins, you got Adrienne Barbeau, you got Janet Leigh, you got Jamie Lee Curtis. You got a lot of people in this. Hal Holbrook. Yeah, you just can't go wrong with a classic like this. So yeah, huge fan of John Carpenter's The Fog. And the Scream Factory 4K looks really good. I've said this before about the John Carpenter films, but I tend to prefer the Scream Factory releases of the John Carpenter films over the UK Studio Canal releases. I believe most, if not all, of the John Carpenter films have a higher quality encode on a BD100, a triple layer BD100 disc for the 4K. Whereas the Studio Canal encodes are only on a BD66, a dual layer BD66 disc. So you do get a little bit better quality encode with the Scream Factory releases. And that's part of why I went that route. Aside from the fact that, I mean, how can you not love this steelbook, right? Look at that art. Isn't that cool? Love it. So yeah, The Fog. For my number 3, I've got another great John Carpenter film that is also rather high up there on my list of favorite John Carpenter films. I'm talking about Prince of Darkness. This movie's awesome. Again, a Scream Factory 4K release, looks incredible. You know, you just can't go wrong with a film like this. I mean, this movie has one of the creepiest, eeriest scenes or set of scenes that I've ever seen in a horror movie. It sends chills down my spine just to this day. Every time I watch it, I still get a chill when those scenes come up. And I'm talking, for those of you who have seen this, I'm talking about the transmission dream sequences, you know what I mean? That shit just creeps me out every time I see it. And yeah, and I love it. I love it. It's awesome. And I love returning to this one quite a bit, just because of, again, the atmosphere. You know, John Carpenter is a master at atmosphere, and this film is certainly no exception. But absolutely love Prince of Darkness. Got Donald Pleasance in this, you know, horror royalty. So you just can't go wrong with a film like this. Great story, great atmosphere, and a great looking 4K as well. So yeah, if you've never seen it by some chance, you definitely should check it out. Prince of Darkness. Next up for my number 4 is probably my favorite vampire movie, and I'm talking about Near Dark. When did this come out? 1987, directed by Catherine Bigelow. So you can't go wrong there, right? For those who don't know, she, of course, directed Point Break, the classic Point Break, and also The Hurt Locker. So this is a great film from her, and I really enjoy the vibe of this one. You've got Lance Henriksen in this one. You've got Bill Paxton and Jeanette Goldstein. So you're bringing back all the Aliens people for a little bit of a reunion for this one. And that's one of the coolest things about this film. I mean, Bill Paxton is awesome in this. Finger licking good, right? So yeah, I just love this film. And if you've never seen it, I only have this German import. I don't think this is in print in the US on Blu-ray. And I hear they're working on a 4K for this, but they've been saying that for a while. So I have no idea when that's going to happen. But it's going to be a day one purchase for me when it does. In the meantime, you know, I was satisfied enough with this German Blu-ray, but I don't think it has English subtitles. And I seem to remember there being something kind of weird about the audio where it was a little bit more difficult for me to hear everything. But that could just be my hearing as well. I am starting to lose a little bit of my hearing, I think, so that could be me. So, but it's just a great film. So if you like vampire flicks, and it's kind of like a vampire movie meets a Western almost, right? It's kind of like a vampire meets a Western. Although it's not, you know, it's modern day, or at least as of 1987, modern era, but it's got a bit of a Western feel for it as well. Kind of an outlaw feel to it. And I just love it. So yeah, if you've never seen Near Dark, I would definitely recommend it. All right, next up for my number 5, we've got a werewolf movie here, my personal favorite werewolf movie, also from Scream Factory and also on 4K. I'm talking about The Howling from 1981. Yep, this is my favorite werewolf movie, at least of the ones I've seen so far. You know, I'm sure there's still some I probably have to see. So I guess it's not fair for me to say that completely without having seen some of the other stuff out there. But of the ones I've seen, of the few werewolf movies that I've seen, I've probably seen a handful of werewolf movies. This is my favorite of the ones that I've seen. And yeah, you just can't go wrong with Dee Wallace. She's awesome, and I love Dee Wallace. I really do. But I don't really feel like I can talk about this one without also talking about the other big werewolf film that came out that year, same year as this one. And of course, I'm talking about my number 6 choice, American Werewolf in London. I know a lot of people like this one more. A lot of people like American Werewolf in London a lot more than The Howling. I'm just the opposite. Now, I like this too. It's, you know, after all, it's on my list, right? But I just think The Howling has a little bit more to it. I feel like The Howling has more story to it, more action. Almost, right? It does feel like it's a more action-packed film, The Howling, especially when you get into the last like half hour of The Howling. It's awesome. I absolutely love it. And I love that ending as well. But I also dig American Werewolf in London, and you can't go wrong with either of these if you're looking for some werewolf action. So for my number 5 and 6, respectively, The Howling and American Werewolf in London. All right, next up, we've got a film directed by the great Stuart Gordon, and I'm talking about Dolls from 1986. I think this may be my favorite Stuart Gordon film of the ones I've seen. You know, I haven't seen a crazy amount of his films, but I've seen, I don't know, half a dozen of his films, and I think this one might be my favorite. And it's perfect for spooky season, especially when you're doing a horror marathon. You know, it's a relatively short film for one thing. It's like 77 minutes, so you're in and out pretty quick, but yet the film still packs a punch, right? There's some great practical effects and stop motion in here, and it's just a really entertaining ride. So I love this film. And, you know, I picked this up as part of the Arrow Enter the Video Store, Empire of Screams, Enter the Video Store box set. I didn't get the really nice box set. I got the more streamlined version here, which is comes with 4 other films in addition. Robot Jox, Arena, what else? Cellar Dweller and Dungeon Master. But I was glad that Arrow put out a streamlined version of this box set, because the main reason I wanted it was for the 2 Stuart Gordon films. You get both Dolls, and then Robot Jox is also a Stuart Gordon film. So it's a great little set. I haven't watched the other films yet. I've only watched the Stuart Gordon films so far, but I do plan on getting to the other ones. But the main reason I got this set was indeed for the Stuart Gordon films, and Dolls in particular. You know, the first time I saw it, I watched it on streaming, and I absolutely loved it, and it just made me that more convinced that I needed to get this Arrow Empire of Scream set. So, but yeah, great little horror film for your horror marathon if you've never seen it. Dolls. Moving right along here to my number 8, we've got a David Cronenberg film here from 1981, a great little gem. I'm talking about Scanners, and this may be my favorite David Cronenberg film. It's really good. You know, well, there is another Cronenberg film on my list, so it might be a tie between those two, but this is up there. It's definitely one of my favorite Cronenberg films. This one I find to be very rewatchable. This film's got Michael Ironside in it, and it's a film about telepathy. And I'm a big fan of films that are about telepathy and telepaths and mind control and that sort of thing. I always love those kind of movies, and I've got a couple others here on my list as well that would fall into that category. But yeah, this one is just a total blast. I always have fun watching this one. And this Criterion Blu-ray, this is a Blu-ray from Criterion. This is a great looking Blu-ray. I mean, this is one I would upgrade to 4K if I had the chance, but even this Blu-ray looks pretty damn good. I was surprised at how good it looked. Great restoration here. So yeah, for my number 8, Scanners from David Cronenberg. For my number 9, we've got a big classic here. I've talked about this a lot on the channel, talking about Dawn of the Dead. This one, I feel like I rewatch it every year, and each year I put on a different version of the film. Right? When I first got this box set, I watched the long extended version, right? And then I think the next year I watched the theatrical, and then after that last year I think I watched the Argento cut when I was watching this. So, but this is one I definitely like to return to a lot. This is a Second Sight UK release, Dawn of the Dead on 4K. We do not have a 4K release of this title here in the US due to some sort of rights licensing issue. But if you want to get this one on 4K, I would highly recommend the Second Sight release. Now they have 2 different releases. They've got that big chunky box. It was like a big box set that had like 7 discs in it. They're super limited edition box. I missed out on that, but they fortunately also put out this streamlined edition, which is a 4-disc set, including 3 4K discs. You get a separate 4K disc for each version of the film, and then you have a Region B Blu-ray that has all the bonus features, including like a retrospective documentary that is really good. So yeah, this is a great release, and I've mentioned it a number of times on the channel, so I'll just move on, but absolutely love Dawn of the Dead. Had to at least mention it here. For my number 10, we have an absolute classic here. I'm not going to spend much time on it at all. I'm just talking about Nightmare on Elm Street. I find the first Nightmare on Elm Street to be very rewatchable. I'm really looking forward to the 4K that's coming out in a couple weeks. I definitely got it pre-ordered, and I will be watching it as soon as I get my hot little hands on it. But yeah, just so much fun. You know, I'm not really into like the whole franchise that heavily, but I do like the first film and the third film, Dream Warriors. In fact, I'm hoping Dream Warriors gets a 4K as well. But those are really the only 2 that I watch or return to with any kind of frequency at all in this franchise, is Nightmare on Elm Street and then Dream Warriors. But the others, I don't really feel the desire to rewatch all that often. So, but yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street. For my number 11, we've got another absolute classic here, talking about Poltergeist, which I also have on 4K. Got this great little steelbook here. I thought the steelbook art looked much better than the slipcover art. And I love that you still get the They're Here classic there, here seen kind of on the back there. But yeah, absolutely love Poltergeist. This is one that's a lot of fun to rewatch. I just love the vibe in this film. The atmosphere is awesome. Steven Spielberg with his kind of 80s suburban Americana feel. Yeah, I love that. You can't go wrong. That's my favorite type of Spielberg, you know, those earlier Spielberg films. And of course, this is both Spielberg and Tobe Hooper. I've always attributed this film to both of them, right? I can see elements of Spielberg in it, and I can see elements of Tobe Hooper in this. I can definitely see Tobe Hooper's influence on this film as well. You know, I don't get really into the debate over who really directed it. I don't really care at this point. I consider it kind of a joint effort that had some of the best of Spielberg and some of the best of Tobe Hooper kind of rolled into one film. So, but yeah, absolutely love Poltergeist on 4K, and it's a great looking 4K release as well. So yeah, Poltergeist for my number 11. For my number 12 is my other favorite David Cronenberg film, and I'm talking about the Dead Zone, Christopher Walken, one of my favorite Christopher Walken roles as well. And the funny thing is, I just bought this Blu-ray last year. I mean, I've seen the film many times. I've been watching the film since the 80s. When did this come out? 1983. So yeah, I've been watching this film since then. I loved it back in the 80s. And yeah, I've always been a big fan of this film, but I didn't get around to picking it up and adding it to my actual collection until last year. Well, of course, I buy the Scream Factory Blu-ray, and then as soon as I buy the Blu-ray, they announce that it's coming out on 4K, right? So we got a 4K release of this. If you want it on 4K, you can definitely get it on 4K. At the time, I was just hesitant to upgrade because I had just bought this. But now it's been a year, and I'm thinking, well, I think I'd kind of like to upgrade it to 4K before I watch it again. So I'll probably be doing that in the next week or two, getting my hands on the 4K upgrade of this, also from Scream Factories. But just a great film, and one I'd highly recommend. Yeah, love Christopher Walken, love The Dead Zone. Moving right along to my number 13, we've got one of my favorite horror franchises, certainly up there in near the top of the list, and I'm talking about Phantasm. Now, for this entry, I'm going to focus on actually two films. I'm kind of cheating for this entry a little bit because really, like, the first film's awesome, but really, I like 1 and 2. And I actually like Phantasm 2 a little bit more than the first Phantasm. So, but I love them both, right? These are like the two that you got to watch, I think. The rest of the franchise, I understand if not everybody gets into it, but these two, I think, are a lot of fun. The thing I like about the Phantasm franchise is that there's a little bit of something for everybody, right? It's not strictly horror. Don Coscarelli, he's a real creative guy, and he throws a lot of stuff in the pot. You get not just horror, but you get some action, you get some kind of slice of life type interpersonal relation type stuff in there. And of course, you get some great atmosphere as well, especially in this first movie. Now, I'm thinking about doing a larger profile on the Phantasm movies here this month. I've actually got my notes on the video almost done. And it was something I had planned on working on last year and doing last year when I did this challenge during spooky season, but I ran out of time and couldn't make that video before the end of October. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just save it for this year. So I think I'm going to do a larger dive on Phantasm here sometime this month. At least that's the plan. We'll see how it works out. But absolutely love the Phantasm movies, and especially Phantasm 1 and Phantasm 2. Great stuff. For my number 14, we've got another John Carpenter film that you just can't go wrong with on 4K. Talking about Christine. Yeah, another classic, right? From 1983. I love this movie, and I remember reading the book when I was young. I was, before the movie came out, I remember reading the book, and I thought the book was really cool. must have been 12 or 13. Reading this book, probably 12 when I was reading the book, and then the movie came out and I watched the movie, and of course the movie is never going to be as good as the book, right? But I still had a lot of fun with this movie. I've always been a fan of John Carpenter's work. Even when I wasn't necessarily the biggest horror fan overall, I still always liked John Carpenter's stuff. And Christine is no exception. 4K looks amazing. The car looks incredible on this. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this if you are if you've been thinking about getting this one on 4K. You definitely can't go wrong with this transfer. So, yeah, John Carpenter's Christine. And then next up, we've got another vampire film. This one's actually one of my wife's personal favorites. She absolutely loves this film. I love it as well. It's a lot of fun to revisit and rewatch. I'm talking about The Lost Boys. Now, admittedly, not the greatest slipcover here, right? Not the greatest art. A lot of people weren't that crazy about it. I was somewhat indifferent because, yeah, I didn't really care that much. I was just happy to get this on 4K. And yeah, this is one I've been having a lot of fun returning to. You can't go wrong with Kiefer Sutherland in this. You definitely can't go wrong with the Coreys, right? They're hilarious in this, the two Coreys. So yeah, Lost Boys, great little vampire flick from, when did this come out? 1987? Yeah. So yeah, The Lost Boys for my number 15. By the way, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, do me a favor and please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, don't forget to activate that notification bell as well so you can be alerted whenever I'm posting videos that you might be interested in. And also don't forget to like the video as well. It really does help with the channel's visibility and the algorithm on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. All right, moving on to number 16. We've got another vampire flick here that is just a whole lot of fun. I'm talking about Fright Night. This is a Sony 4K release, Steelbook, of course, and I'll show you the back there for those interested. Now, I don't believe Sony ever released a standard edition of this. I think they only released this 4K in Steelbook form, and it's probably long gone by now, although you can probably find it on the secondary market. Might cost you a bit more, but I think these may be out of print. I'm not sure about that for sure. But anyway, just a great film that you really can't go wrong with from 1985. It's got some great humor to it, but it's also, it's got its horror bona fides in there as well. It is a full-on vampire flick at the same time. And I always have fun returning to this one. And this has got some great bonus features as well. There's I think there's like a 2.5-hour making of documentary that's really good. Yeah, it's quite substantive. It really is. So substantive bonus features and just an incredible looking transfer as well. Sony does a great job on their 4K releases. They always do good work. And I've always been really happy with the restorations we get from Sony. So yeah, Fright Night for my number 16. Next up, got another Scream Factory 4K here, talking about Alligator. I'm a big fan of creature films. That's one of my favorite horror subgenres, and I love Alligator, to the point where I actually like it more than Jaws. I really do, starring Robert Forster, who I also love. I've always enjoyed him in anything I've seen him in, but yeah, this is a great film, a lot of fun, and great practical effects, and just a great vibe and atmosphere all around. So, and it's an amazing looking 4K. The 4K looks killer on this. As you would expect from Scream Factory, they usually do a pretty good job with their 4K releases, and this is definitely no exception. Great looking 4K. So yeah, Alligator for my number, what is this, 17? 17. So there you go. Next up, we got a little sci-fi horror for you here. One of my favorite sci-fi horror films, one of them. I've got a few, but talking about Event Horizon here. And today I'm showing you my Blu-ray. Well, I also have a 4K of this as well, the Paramount 4K here. But this is the Scream Factory Blu-ray, which also looks really good, by the way. Of course, I always prefer 4K wherever possible, but I don't think I've shown off my Blu-ray before, and I got a cool slip cover there. I like the art on it. that's why I wanted to show it to you guys. But I've definitely talked about this film quite a bit. Huge fan of this film, and it's just a great sci-fi horror film. So I won't say a whole lot about it, but if you've never seen Event Horizon, this is definitely one I would recommend. Absolutely love this film. So yeah, Event Horizon. Okay, and for my number 19, we are back to telepathy here. And I'm talking one of the big classics as far as telepathy is concerned. Talking about Carrie. Love Carrie. I've got the 4K Steelbook here from Scream Factory, directed by the great Brian De Palma, who I love his work. And this just has some amazing stuff in it, some great atmosphere. And I love the way De Palma makes films, the way he uses the split screen in this, the way he composes his shots and everything. I just love his work. He's great. And this is a great looking 4K. It looks faithful to the film. It looks like you would expect it to look, because it's got some softness to it, but that's like part of the film. That's the way it looks naturally anyway. Yeah, it's a great looking 4K disc that you can't go wrong with if you're a fan of this film. So yeah, Carrie for my number, what am I on now? 19. All right, so Carrie for my number 19. And for my number 20 is another Brian De Palma film and another telepathy film. I actually like this one a little bit more than Carrie. I'm talking about The Fury. This is a Region B Blu-ray from Arrow Video. It may be out of print now. It actually has reversible cover art. And I'm going to show you this in case any of you are interested in picking this up. That's what the cover art actually looks like. Like, you might actually be able to find it on Amazon. And if you can kind of see that, I don't want to actually take the whole thing out. But yeah, reversible cover art. It's a great film. A lot of fun. Starring Kirk Douglas, Andrew Stevens, and Amy Irving. Great cast. And yeah, I actually like this one a little bit more than Carrie. It's kind of a similar concept, similar premise as Carrie. It's not exactly the same, but telepathy and mind control is involved. And yeah, I just think it's a more entertaining film than Carrie by a little bit, but I love Carrie too. So got to be careful there. But both of these had to make my list because I think both Carrie and The Fury are very, very rewatchable horror films that I find I like to return to quite a bit. So yeah, The Fury. Next up, for my number 21, we've got The Blob. I've certainly talked about this one quite a bit on the channel. Absolutely love this 4K. It's one of my favorite blind buys ever, and I can't wait to come back and watch it again this year. Got it last year. Was it last year that it came out? And I've already watched the film, at least a couple times since then, and I'm really anxious to get back to it because it's a great looking 4K, and it's just a fun, kind of like B drive-in movie, classic drive-in movie type horror film, creature flick. And like I said, creature flicks are among some of my favorite types of horror movies. I love creature flicks, and I guess this would count as a creature flick if you count The Blob as a creature. Yeah. But just love this one from Scream Factory. Stellar looking 4K. And yeah, The Blob. All right, and moving right along, from 1978, another classic here that I always have fun coming back to. I'm talking about Invasion of the Body Snatchers with an amazing cast, right? Donald Sutherland, Brooke Adams, Veronica Cartwright, Jeff Goldblum. Who else? Leonard Nimoy is in this. And this is another one of those deals where it's the atmosphere that really sucks me into this film. I love the atmosphere of this film, and that's a big part of what makes it so rewatchable for me. And that's a common theme going throughout many of these titles. The atmosphere. I'm a big fan of atmosphere. And when you can give me just this killer atmosphere, I mean, there's got to be more than just atmosphere, but I find a film's atmosphere can play a big role in its rewatchability, personally for me, right? So a lot of my most rewatchable films are on this list because of the atmosphere. But this is a lot of fun, and I mean, I don't know, how much can you really say about something like this? We all know what this one is, right? So, just an absolute classic here from Kino Lorber, and a great looking 4K as well. So, Invasion of the Body Snatchers for my number, 22. Next up, we've got a Dario Argento film, the Italian maestro, master of horror. I'm talking about Phenomena. This is from 1985. And I think of all the Dario Argento films, personally, I find this one to be the most rewatchable. This is the one that's just, I love returning to this film. It's a really bonkers film. It's really out there, but that's what I love about it. And it's just so much fun. And it's got some great kills. Of course, there are other Argento films that I love returning to as well. I mean, this was a tough call for me, you know, trying to choose one Argento film that I find to be very rewatchable. But I think of all of his films, this was probably the most rewatchable and the one that I like to return to the most. But let me mention a couple others here while I'm at it. Let's see here. Got Tenebrae. This is another one. I mean, I've talked about it before on the channel as well. You know, great 4K here, Tenebrae. And this is one that I like to rewatch quite a bit as well. And I think as far as rewatchable classics, I think the other one would be Deep Red, right? I love Deep Red. Great film. But yeah, Phenomena is the big one for me. This is the one I have watched more than the other Dario Argento films I have. It's just a really fun ride. So yeah, and of course I've got the nice 4K chunky box here from Synapse Films. I've mentioned this one quite a bit, I think, on the channel. So, but just a great film. So, and a great 4K transfer. One of the better Dario Argento films on 4K. I mean, this is on par or pretty close to being on par with Suspiria. And if you've seen the Synapse 4K of Suspiria, that is a reference quality title. This is damn near close. So it's a really stunning looking 4K. So yeah, Dario Argento's Phenomena. For my number 24, another reference quality disc that I've certainly talked about on the channel before, The Shining. Absolute classic, right? From 1980, directed by the great Stanley Kubrick, of course. This is probably my favorite Kubrick film. It's either between this or 2001, but yeah, this is such a classic. You just can't go wrong with a film like this. But I figure you guys all know what this one is. There's probably not a whole lot I can really say about it, other than this is another reference quality 4K. So if you're new to 4K, and you're a fan of this film, but you haven't picked it up yet on 4K, you should definitely get this in your collection. You'll thank me for it. Next up, we've got another George Romero film here from 1973. I'm talking about The Crazies. This is another one of those deals where I just love the vibe and atmosphere of this film. And I love revisiting this film. I think the thing I like about it is it's got a similar kind of vibe to it as Dawn of the Dead. It's not exactly the same, but and Day of the Dead too. It's got a similar kind of vibe as those Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead films. And that's why I love it so much, because I love that vibe. I love that, you know, 70s or 80s George Romero. You know, great stuff. Of course, there's always a lot of great subtext in his films, a lot of stuff to kind of chew on and think about underneath the surface, right? So, and this film is certainly no exception in that regard. So, yeah, I always enjoy rewatching The Crazies. So The Crazies for my number, what are we at now? 25. Okay, for my number 26, we've got one of the few more contemporary modern horror films on this list. Most of the titles on this list are 70s or 80s titles, but this is one of the few that's not. And I'm talking about The Conjuring. And I'm kind of cheating for this entry as well, because really both the first two Conjuring films are excellent and I would definitely recommend them. But I love revisiting these films. Just awesome spooky atmosphere, and you get some great stuff in both of these films. Now, the third one wasn't as good. I didn't like the third one as much. I still liked it, but these first two are, I definitely think are among some of the more rewatchable horror films in my collection. Certainly, as far as contemporary horror is concerned, these probably come pretty close to topping the more contemporary films. You got Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga doing a great job playing the Warrens in these movies. So yeah, Just great stuff. Love them both. Always enjoy returning to these, The Conjuring 1 and The Conjuring 2. All right, and for my number 27, I'm cheating once again here. I've got several titles under this entry because I didn't want to have these three titles take up three slots on my list. But we got to talk about the original classic from John Carpenter, Halloween, right? Absolutely love the Halloween franchise. It's another one of my favorite horror franchises, and every year I like to revisit Halloween around this time of the year. And if I can, well, I like to revisit Halloween. If I have time, I like to do Halloween 2 as well, right? Because these work perfectly together. Just, watch this one and go right into this one. It's a perfect experience. Gotta love it. But in addition to those, Halloween 3 is a big one for me. This is, I think, one of the greatest standalone horror films we've ever seen. I really do think it's a great film. It's certainly one of my favorite standalone horror films. And next to the original Halloween, it's also my favorite in the Halloween franchise, short of, right below John Carpenter's original. Absolutely love this film. And I love to rewatch this one every year on Halloween. If I can, I try to have this playing when trick-or-treaters are coming to the door. It's the perfect movie to have on while kids are out trick-or-treating, right? And I don't seem to get too tired of this one. I always love returning to it and rewatching it. Starring, of course, the great Tom Atkins. You can never go wrong with a little Tom, right? So, but yeah, love Halloween 3. Usually I'm trying to watch Halloween 1, 2, and 3 every year. I mean, usually. I don't always get to Halloween 2, but at the very least, if I can, I try to watch at least Halloween and Halloween 3 on Halloween, preferably. Doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes I'll watch Halloween 1 and 2, a few days before Halloween or something, and then save this one for Halloween. But I do love these movies. And of course, you can't go wrong with these Scream Factory restorations either. I gotta say something about these 4Ks because they look incredible. I love the work that Scream Factory did with these. Halloween 3 looks stunning, and Halloween looks stellar as well. I know some people prefer the Lionsgate release of Halloween, but I don't like that one as much. I know some people have said that is the correct version, which, whatever. Correct or incorrect, this is the version I actually like the more. I think this one has a lot more pop to it than the Lionsgate release of Halloween. The Lionsgate release seems like it's I don't know, kind of has a duller, more muted look to it. It just doesn't have the vibrancy and pop that the Scream Factory release does. And I don't care if it is revisionist. This one looks better. So yeah, love the Scream Factory 4Ks of these films. They all look great, but especially Halloween 1 and Halloween 3. So yeah, Halloween 1 through 3 for this entry. Okay, getting into the final stretch here. For my number 28, we've got Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 on 4K from Vinegar Syndrome. I actually like TCM2 more than the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's just my thing. I just think this one's more fun. Now, I do like the original as well, and of course, I own that on 4K as well, but I wasn't going to make this a double entry. For this particular entry, I really did want to emphasize the second film. I just think it's a lot more fun. Yeah, it's pretty over the top and bonkers, but that's what I love about it. In this particular case, there's just some great stuff in there, and you can't help but be a little bit amused when you're watching this, which I think was the effect that Tobe Hooper was going for. So it's a pretty amusing horror movie, but it's just a lot of fun, and you can't go wrong with Dennis Hopper, who was in this film. So yeah, love Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and this 4K is incredible. You got your Breakfast Club artwork there. Can't go wrong with something like that. And there's some amazing bonus features in this as well, like a lot of bonus features. You get the full making of documentaries and retrospective documentaries and tons of new interviews. Yeah, just some great stuff here. So TCM2 for my number 28. And then for my number 29, another one I've talked about quite a bit on the channel, talking about Pumpkinhead. Really love this one. I brought this one up, I think, recently, so I'm not going to say too much about it, other than again, it's one of those perfect old school drive-in movie theater experiences, right? That's what I'm reminded of when I watch this movie. Amazing atmosphere, amazing creature film, and yeah, it harkens back to the day of watching movies, classic B movies at the drive-in, right? And that's what I think of when I'm watching this. And that's why I like to return to it so much, because it's just got a great vibe. And of course, you got Lance Hendrickson in this. You can never, never go wrong with Lance, right? So I love Lance. And of course, another stellar 4K from Scream Factory, right? Just amazing looking. So yeah, Pumpkinhead. All right, and then these last two are ones I've definitely talked about a lot on the channel. I'm not even going to say that much about them. These next two, these last two, are probably the two single most rewatchable horror films in my collection. First off, I'm talking about The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing, my favorite John Carpenter film. This kind of set the standard for practical effects. Rob Bottin just did some incredible stuff with this. So, and I've talked about this movie before on this channel. This 4K release is, I think, one of the best 4K releases out there. It is definitely one of my top 10 favorite 4Ks that I own in my collection. Absolutely a reference quality transfer and restoration. So, but you can never go wrong with The Thing, right? This is just an absolute classic. Starring Kurt Russell and Wilford Brimley and others as well, Keith David. You just gotta love this one, right? So yeah, The Thing for my number 30. And then of course my number 31, the last one, I almost didn't even know if I wanted to mention it, but I figured I can't talk about horror without talking about the ultimate sci-fi horror classic, that is Alien, right? This is one of the most rewatchable films in my collection, period. Not just horror, of anything in my collection. And The Thing's up there too, right? Two of the most rewatchable staples in my collection, whether it be horror or otherwise. I tend to watch this one a lot, probably 3-4 times a year. I'm revisiting this one. In fact, I don't usually watch it during October. Same thing with The Thing. I tend to watch these at other times of the year, so that when we get to October, I'm focused on other types of horror movies. I'm not usually in the mood to watch this during the month of October, but it is an absolute horror classic and definitely one of my most rewatchable horror films in my collection. So yeah, of course, an all-time favorite film as well, right? Like a top 5 all-time favorite for me, top 3. So love Alien, and yeah, Alien for my number 31. Okay, so that about wraps it up for my 31 most rewatchable horror staples on physical media, at least in my personal collection. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. What do you think of my list here today? What do you think of my choices? And what are some of your most rewatchable horror staples in your collection? I always love hearing from you guys and chatting with you guys, so make sure you leave me some feedback down below. Also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Thank you so much for watching today, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you soon.